Hello, all you fancy folks out there. Welcome to the WCK podcast. As an offshoot of our regular podcast, we've been doing a special interview with the DM series. My name is Kristin, and today I'm sitting down with a wicked cool person. Our guest is an incredible talent, the one behind the groovy theme music for this series. He is a man of many talents, and I'm very excited to be sitting down today with Kev G. Moore, the absolute greatest. I was informed that I had to say that word several times, so I'm just going to try and sprinkle it in if it's not already written down. Welcome, Kev.
Thank you. You forgot of all time.
Oh, of all time. Dang it. All right. We've got more time. I'll say it
Take
at
two.
least
Okay.
3 more times to mea culpa. Kev is an artist, the greatest of all time, some may even say. But he is an artist in every sense of the word, a musician and a visual artist. Not only does he inspire people with those mediums, he's also a mental health peer specialist and a mental health advocate and an all-around incredible person, and I can't wait to dive into this. Kev, how are you today?
I'm very good, thank you. That was a wonderful introduction.
Oh, I've been working so hard on it. You've been playing Dungeons and Dragons a long time, yeah?
Yeah, I'm 51. I started when I was in junior high, so that was in the late 80s.
Just a couple years ago.
Yeah, it was very different back then, and where if you had an AC of, the lower your AC, the better. So
Yeah. Is that the THACO stuff?
I don't know what that is.
THACO times? I don't know. I just know that Chet talks about THACO sometimes, and it's from a system long since gone. But I mean, what do you think about how the system has changed since you first started playing until now?
I love it. I got back into it. I stopped playing in high school, and it was a much different game where it might have just been the players that I was playing with, but there wasn't a lot of role playing. The game would start with, you had a grid of paper. Okay, you're standing in front of a dungeon door. What do you want to do? Well, I want to go through the door. Okay, there's a monster. All right, and that was the whole game. There was no back and forth, and so I stopped playing after high school. I enjoyed it back then, and I remember my character name was Ike, and he was a fighter. Yeah, and it was a lot of fun. One of the guys that I used to play with back then still runs. He was the DM back then, and he's still running a game, and some of those guys are still in it. And they still play the same way. It's still Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And, so that's pretty neat. But I got back into it about 10 years ago. Is that about when 5e came out? I got into it when 5e came out. Yeah.
I was just gonna ask you. That feels about right. It feels about right. So I mean, if you got into it when 5e came out, that means you went from AD&D to 5e. You kind of skipped over those other ones. Nice.
But I found it so easy to learn.
Yeah.
And pick up, and just by watching, I was watching at the time Acquisitions Incorporated, and their live shows, and I picked up the game within watching one episode. I was like, okay, I understand all the changes, and it's very simple. Yep. But they were role playing, and I couldn't believe it. And so I started to get back into it, and then of course I discovered Critical Role, which really changed my whole outlook on the game, and I started playing right away too, locally.
So back in high school, you had that person who DM'd for you. Did you ever dip your toes into the water back then, or did you wait until you were more comfortable maybe with 5e and the resurgence of your love for it?
No, back then I did not understand what the DM was doing. I thought they were this magically brilliant person, and I remember he made the big mistake of putting time travel into his campaign. And it screwed everything up for everybody. We had to start a new campaign. But other than that, I just thought he was this brilliant guy who could come up with this story every week. Yeah. I never dared. Yeah.
So then, obviously, now we're talking, you first put that hat on in the 5e rule set. Talk to me about when you started to take over as game master and what that first campaign or one shot or whatever it is that you ran. Tell me what it looked like.
Well, what inspired me to DM was watching Critical Role,
Hmm.
and I I thought, I could put stories like that together, and it's a lot like performing on stage. Um, and I couldn't find any DMs, and I find that's often why people become a DM is because they couldn't find anyone to DM.
Hmm.
So I wanted to play really bad, and there was a gaming shop near me, but I couldn't find any DMs, and I felt like I could do it, so I just tried to do it. And I said I'll run
Um,
a game for beginners,
hmm.
and because I'm still a beginner. Yeah.
So, all right, just for anybody listening, background, I met Kev through an online game. Very obviously, we both, in stark contrast, I think, to any of the other podcasts that anyone has listened to, I am no longer the token American. There's another American joining me.
Yeah.
And ironically, we both met through a person from across the pond. They were DMing online. And I think our entire group wound up being Americans. We
We
were
were all
all in,
American. Yeah.
yeah, and we were all in different, well, some of us were in different time zones, but it did span the country.
Yeah.
And that was, 2 years ago, maybe?
Yeah, I remember thinking it
Yeah.
was so cool to have a DM with a British accent.
So just to put that into kind of perspective for me, if we met 2 years ago in that online campaign, did you dip your toes into DMing before or after that?
Before that, I
Before
was
that.
running. Yeah, there's this cafe right down the street from my house that
Yeah.
it's a board game cafe, and they run D&D. So I started hanging out there, and I saw people playing, but I couldn't get into any games.
Hmm.
So I just ran a beginner's game. I figured I can handle a level 1 to 3 beginner game with
Yeah.
the rules and everything. And I ran an open world
Yep.
and just kind of made it up as I went along every week. Whatever happened last week, okay, I'll make up a story continuing from there. And it went
Yeah.
really well. I had some players who were really into role playing, and they understood that some days I would show up mentally prepared and some days
Hmm.
I would not.
Yep. Yep.
um, and so it went well. Then COVID hit,
Yeah.
and that's when I started playing, I think, with you online, and that was my first online experience with D&D.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you feel like the 5e system made the DMing process easier or less daunting, and that's what kind of gave you the courage to jump onto that side of the screen.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely would not have started to run a world using the old system.
No, I still have one of my books, The Fiend Folio, from back then,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
which I still use the stats from. I just reversed them.
Hmm.
But I think what gave me the courage to DM was I could watch people run games online, like
Hmm.
on YouTube and stuff, so I can see what's going on and what's going to happen and all the different things. I know when to do ability checks and
Yep.
saving throws because I've seen other DMs do it just by watching online. And then when I put it into practice, it worked. What I
Yeah.
saw people do online, I did in the game, and it was kind of fake it till you make it.
Well, you fake it pretty well. So you've done DMing and playing now, both in person and online. For each experience, being a player and then being a game master, which do you prefer? Do you have a preference, and why?
Online, I prefer being a player. I
Hmm.
find being a DM online difficult for me. I get more out of in-person D&D if I'm DMing because I can
Hmm.
interact with people more freely, and I feel like I'm the host of a little party. But
Yeah,
when I'm
yeah.
online, well, some people are on camera, some people aren't, and I'm looking at maps and thinking about tech. And when I'm in person, I don't have to think about tech. I just pull out my maps and
Yep.
I can make stuff up and completely change the story and add in new characters on the fly. Where
Yeah.
I feel like online, I'm restricted to what I've pre-programmed.
Yep. I think that's a good point because I do feel like, in general, especially in doing these interviews with people, listening to their preferences, I feel like it's almost people feel more comfortable using those moments where they don't necessarily have something prepared, using those in a theater of the mind kind of aspect, where when you're online and you're all kind of staring at a screen, you feel like there has to be something on the screen, versus when you're in person, you just kind of are all there pretending, right? But you're all there actively engaging, and it doesn't maybe feel as personal, although it can, but it doesn't maybe feel as personal. I think that's a good insight. Now, you mentioned that the people that you play with when you come to the table, sometimes they are able to understand how mentally prepared you are on any given day, especially as a person who does so much work in the mental health field. I want to talk to you about that for a second.
Sure.
Mental fatigue is a real thing, just in general. And as somebody who is overseeing the entirety of a game, as the dungeon master, game master, whatever you would like to call it, I'd imagine that it feels really, really heavy because you feel responsible for everybody else's enjoyment. So when you hit those kind of walls of mental fatigue, how do you deal with it?
I take a lot of breaks. I
Hmm.
run shorter games than most people, where most people run a 3.5, 4 hour game. I run
Hmm.
a 2.5 to 3 hour game.
Yep.
Because for me, when I'm running a D&D game in person more so, I feel like I'm on stage and I need to wear the happy mask of the host, keep
Yep.
everyone involved, and try to make sure my main job is that everyone has a good time.
Hmm.
Um, and on some days, that does not take a lot of effort, and I really enjoy it. But some days I show up and it's really taking a lot of effort to wear that mask.
Yeah.
Um, and the thought of running a D&D game itself can be overwhelming.
Hmm.
Um, but the people that I'm playing with are always aware in the beginning that there may be days like this.
Hmm.
And they're usually very patient, and they help me out with the rules, and they look up things for me and stuff like that.
Yeah. I love that you just said that because we had an interview earlier with Joe, who is a newer DM, and he said that sometimes he gets self-conscious and frustrated when he has to look up something, or another player, not that he doesn't appreciate it, but another player will look it up for him. But as somebody who's been doing this since the late 80s, right, and then even got back into it 10 years ago, to not have everything cemented in your brain, which I can't imagine that anybody would expect that of you unless you were the creator of it. And even maybe if
Yeah.
you were the creator of it, sometimes, you just have to double check things, especially since they change at the rate that they've been changing at this point. Um, I hope that that brings comfort to any newer DMs who are listening, that you don't have to know everything. And just asterisk, I know that you said you do feel like it's your responsibility to make sure everybody's having fun. It's a group playing game, and that does fall on everybody. Like, you can only do so much to make everybody have fun. If they just show up to the table and they're also kind of in that kind of funky mood, maybe there's nothing you can even do. But let's talk about that for a second. I know that the place that you were running games that's local to you,
Yeah.
I remember, I believe, that sometimes the attendance was inconsistent, right? Um, and in instances like that, and in instances where people come to the table that maybe are feeling like you do on those days, mentally kind of just, I'm not really feeling it, and I'm hoping that if I just go and fake it till I make it, that I will be able to surmount that little hump that I'm trying to get over, and it will be better once I get into it. How do you deal with all of that? How do you deal with kind of overcoming inconsistencies and maybe other people's emotions that they bring to the table?
Oh, well, if someone's, I usually have, if I'm playing a longer campaign, you get to know your players. Often though, I am running beginner games. It's where I feel I have the most fun and I'm the most comfortable. And first responding to the rules thing, needing to know the rules. Whenever I run a beginner game, I usually have someone in the game who is not a beginner. And I tell them, hey, do you want to be my rules person? When there's a question, you be the one who looks. There's usually someone in every group who is a great note taker and someone who's really fast at looking up rules. So I let those people do what they love to do. So I don't worry about having to know everything. There's no way to, and I just rely on a rule looker-upper.
A rule looker-upper. That is actually now the greatest person ever has given us such a wonderful term. So, if any of you people out there are the rule looker-upper officially, feel free to get a t-shirt, a name tag, some sort of identifier for you personally, rule looker-upper official.
If someone's having a hard time, I've had some instances where someone would say, they talk to me before the game and say, oh, something bad just happened or whatever. I'm having a really bad day. And I'll take it easy on them role playing. I won't call them out as much. And sometimes I'll include them. I'll just make up something that happens that's going to really make their character shine a little bit. Yeah. Or laugh. If I can make a player laugh, then I'm not a funny person in normal life. I'm very quiet. But when I play D&D, I get silly and I feel silly. So I try to make people laugh. And if they do, then I feel like I did a good job.
That's funny because I was immediately going to interrupt you and say, I always laugh when I'm interacting with you, but it's generally revolving around DMing. I mean, not DMing, Dungeons and Dragons in general. So maybe it's just Dungeons and Dragons that brings out that side.
Yeah, it brings out the silly in me, yeah.
Going back to that campaign that we played in together, you and I have definitely had conversations about how it can be helpful to role play through certain things as a form of healing. It's happened to me. I know it's happened to you. For example, I believe that one of the conversations you and I specifically had was being able to role play through conflict and still having the group be able to stay together. Your characters are in the middle of some sort of conflict. And although it may be immediately kind of triggering, it's also really nice to be able to sit back and watch that play out and know that it's going to be okay at the end. You have that confidence that whatever happens in this session, 99 times out of 100 is still going to be okay at the end of the day. And I think it's such a wonderful side effect to such a simple role-playing game, right? I'd love to know in what ways you feel that Dungeons and Dragons has helped you as a person.
Okay. First, I want to say that I spaced out during half of that, but I got most of it.
Do you want me to ask it all again?
No,
I'm happy to. Okay, you got it.
I remember. That was a very dynamic group for me to play with when we started playing, and we were dealing with some stuff. I don't think what people knew in that group is that I had just lost my mother not long ago. And then I got thrown into a situation where my character's mother betrayed the group. Yeah. And I was like, I don't know what to do with this game, So, and then there were people in the group that triggered me. They were loud and aggressive and very nice people, but just their personalities triggered me. I felt like you kind of kept getting thrown into the mother of the group type. And I could see you fighting against it. Like, I'm not the mother of this group. But it was an interesting game with an interesting dynamic. The way I have a lot of difficulty with social situations and being social. I'm much of a recluse. So D&D has helped me be more social and feel safe with people even that I don't know, because I'm doing, especially as a DM, because as a DM, I'm in a social situation, but I'm the host. Yep. So people need to talk to me. I'm not going to become a wallflower. As a player, I can sometimes become a wallflower and just not say anything. Yeah. or just in social situations altogether.
Mm-hmm.
So just like being on stage and performing, running a D&D game for me is a social exercise for me to be with people, and sometimes I have to do things that are very uncomfortable for me personally, like argue with someone, which is very difficult for me, raise my voice, or portray different emotions and things like that. It gives me a space to do that where it's just a game. So if I say something bad, or which I often, in my general improvised conversation like we're having now, I often have a fear that I'm going to say something wrong. As a DM, I feel a little more freedom in role playing, that I can be a character who sticks his foot in his mouth now and then, and things like that. And it helps me learn how to be more social in real life.
Yep.
And how to deal with other people and interact with other people when they have those emotions coming at me. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. So you're very vocal about it, so I don't feel like I'm outing you.
Right.
But you are neurodivergent, and I love that the deeper involved in this game, the more experience I have with different people, the more I see what I had kind of suspected very early on. So my oldest is also neurodivergent, and he's the one who got me into this game. And I actually had seen it right before he mentioned it to me. So I had kind of clocked it on my radar already. But he is a part of a social group to help him with social skills, right? Figuring out how to interact with people, pick up on social cues, things like that. And when I went in, it literally kind of everything happened right before COVID, right? And of course, if you're in a social group and then COVID happens, you can no longer be in-person social.
Yes.
But when I went in, I saw on their board that they had several Dungeons and Dragons, I don't want to call them therapy sessions, but kind of therapy sessions. And I think that cannot be undervalued, right? So many of us are neurodivergent. So many of us are neurodivergent and don't even realize that we're neurodivergent.
Right,
But if you even feel the slightest amount of social anxiety or trepidation when you get into those situations, I really, really think that it is such a good and safe and healthy way to be able to role play through situations, like you said, that you're not necessarily comfortable with, that do ultimately kind of, I don't want to say numb you to that anxiety, but they help you overcome it, right? Because the more experience you have with it, the more you realize, or you even watch other people experience and see how they deal with it. So it's a learning process. And hopefully for everybody, it's a safe space. I think that, the community that we have, I can speak with the utmost confidence that if everybody feels comfortable, no matter which kind of groups that they are in within our community. And I wish that for everybody. But yeah, it's such a big topic. I've even seen D&D offered as kind of a certification for mental health therapists, which I think is fascinating. Actually, I think I sent it to you at some point. But yeah, it's a great topic that I do plan on actually exploring a little more in depth at a later date. I think that our producer is telling me that they also use it in the military, and I think even like group team building exercises in different workspaces. I know one of the people in our community does it through work. So yeah, I'll move on because I could get caught up in that topic.
Well, I have something to say about that. That when your son was trying to, be more social with D&D, that's what I was trying to do back in before COVID. Is I got into D&D to be more social, and then COVID hit, and we all got locked up, and that's when I started playing online. But there are the online courses to be a therapeutic DM. Out on the West Coast in California, there are therapists who offer it on their website, that they offer regular therapy, but they also offer DM
I love
services. So,
I,
yeah,
I
it's
think
great.
that's so fascinating. I really love talking to you about it because I feel like you have such a breadth of experience in the mental health field in general, and then how lovely it pairs with Dungeons and Dragons. But we'll get you back for that.
Okay.
So, talking about your experience as a dungeon master in general, what do you think has been your biggest challenge? Is it those days that you come to the table not feeling fully mentally prepared or really kind of in the right mood, or is it something else?
My biggest challenge is my brain. Yeah, that
Yep, yep.
I get very nervous before a game and I want to cancel. And
Oh,
it's stage fright really,
yeah,
and that's my biggest thing. Is my biggest stopper is I get nervous to do it, and so I try to. And I will over prep as a way to procrastinate actually running the game because I'm nervous to run the game.
yeah,
Um, and this past year, I haven't run many games because I've been kind of busy. And but some of it also has been I've just been too nervous.
yeah.
And and so this year, I kind of committed myself to not over prepping and just getting it out there, which is strange because it's a lot like I used to be with my music,
Hmm.
um, where I would be very nervous to share my music. Um, and I would overwork on it and not do that. Um, but I'm not that way anymore. I'll write a song and I'll put it out to the world when it's not done. uh,
Yeah.
so I look forward to getting that way with my DMing, and the way that's gonna come is just by me running more games.
Just
Just
doing it. Yep,
don't worry about it. Grab a module and say, let's play D&D and do it. Yeah.
yep. Do you? Oh gosh, I have a thousand questions that I want to ask. So you said grab a module, but I also know that you're working on a homebrew campaign, which we'll talk about in a second. Do you feel like you prefer one over the other, or do they both kind of serve a purpose for you when you feel like, yeah, I just want to get something done and I don't want to have to do all of the prep I need to get out of my head. This is module time versus, I really am feeling like I need to be creative and I want to tell a story of my own, and this is homebrew time.
Yeah, for one shots, two shots, I love modules.
Hmm.
It's fun to look up a module and go, oh, this looks fun, and just run it.
Yep.
Um, but if it's going to be a campaign, I've run campaigns like Waterdeep, and I did not enjoy running a campaign out of a book
No.
every week. And you have to read the whole book first.
Ew,
uh,
reading.
so I
I do know some
enjoy.
DMs who do not read the whole book beforehand.
Um, yeah, I'm not big on that. I can read a module.
Hmm.
So I enjoy doing one-shot modules, but if it's I really enjoy putting a homebrew campaign together.
Hmm.
Um, some of the work I have taken away from me because I often use the Taldore campaign guide, so it
Mm,
gives me the world. I don't have to create the world,
yep.
um, and then I just put my story in that world. I
Yeah.
already know the world of Critical Role in my head, back and
Yep.
front. So it's not something I need to look stuff up with. So it takes
Yeah.
away some of the work.
That's
Um,
great.
when it comes to prepping, I often use like I'd have a hard time looking up stats, and it was just so time consuming looking up stats. So recently, I've been using ChatGPT
Hmm.
to say, "Give me the stats on this. Give me the stats on this,"
Give me the
and
stats.
give me the ruling on this because it knows all the rules.
Hmm.
So that's been helping me with prep too. The prep that I
That's
don't like to do.
that's a handy little thing to have in your toolbox.
Yeah.
Um, So yeah, that answers another one of the questions for me is prep. So I do just want to talk about something that I love that you do, is that sometimes in your prep for specifically in-person games, you like to hand draw your maps. And maybe that's part of your procrastination technique. Oh, my map
Yeah.
isn't done yet. I can't possibly.
Yeah.
I know that you're not going to get to this section of the map for 4 years, but it's not done, so I can't run today. Um, Talk to me about maybe some other things that you feel like you do maybe differently than other DMs, because I don't know most DMs that draw their own. I do know several, but I think by and large, a lot of people are either using a grid like you did way back in the day. I've got this big rollout grid that I have, and we just draw simple shapes on it. I'm not drawing mountains and castles and whatever. I do have kids with toys, and if I have a castle, I can put a castle down, but that's because I have toys available to play with. But yeah, so hand drawing maps, which I think is enchanting. What other kind of things do you feel like you do that maybe are great, but also maybe kind of hinder you and allow you to be able to procrastinate?
Well, when I first started playing D&D, there were no maps. We didn't use battle maps at all. It
Yes,
was all
yes.
theater of the mind. If you wanted a map, you had your own grid sheet that you would keep track of where you were going. And I still like theater of the mind, but I found that people have different. Having a mind's eye perspective comes in a spectrum for people. Some people cannot picture in their head a battle map.
Me.
Yeah, and I understand that. So I like theater of the mind, and I use it as much as I can. But if there's a battle, I'm going to use a map, because even back in the day, the DM would have their own map to keep track, because they're keeping track of everybody.
Right.
So I feel like the DM at least needs a map. I enjoy drawing battle maps because I enjoy drawing. When when I first started playing again, we had the whiteboard grid, and you would
Yep.
just draw your maps on the fly and erase that. I really enjoy that,
Yep.
because I can show you what in the room you can see, rather than it's like a fog of war that I can.
Yep.
Um, but I enjoy drawing, and I'm an artist, so it's fun for me to sit and just put in lots of color and lots of little details and things that people do graphically nowadays. I just
Yeah.
like to do it on paper. And it's fun to just go and show up with these rolled up maps. People like things they can touch and feel.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
I only use a map once, so I let them draw on it and do whatever they want to it and
That's
keep
so
it.
cool. Yeah.
So maps are just a fun part for me. It will allow me to procrastinate, though. The
Yeah.
last game, I was procrastinating doing a beginner's game, and then finally I just took these 3 white pieces of paper and a black magic marker and made these quick maps, and I rolled them up and went over and played. But
Nice.
um,
Now,
I enjoy when as a player, when there's a good map, though. It's
yeah,
fun.
I do have to say that I can appreciate, even though somebody who is I don't know, like mentally blind, like I've talked about it before, where closing my eyes and trying to visualize something is hard for me.
That's a real thing. There's
It-
there's a condition, yeah, that
Yep.
if you yeah, there's a test for it. Yeah.
I don't know what it's called, but I'm pretty sure I've got it. So, for example, I know that other people can't see, but I have a rather beautiful but large tattoo on my arm. And when the artist said, "What colors do you want here?" I have this like stained glass piece in the background. I was like, "Could you please print me out a picture so I can take it home and color it in like a toddler?" Because I can't just look at that and go, "Oh, red would look like nice there, and it would look really nice against a blue." I have to see it with my eyeballs. I cannot close my eyes and picture it that way. So a battle map specifically, when we're fighting, and I've done it before, where people are like, "All right, we're in a fight and I don't have a map ready, so what are you going to do?" And I go, how close am I to this? So many of these
Yeah.
spells have ranges. Like, can I touch them? Am I 30 feet away? Am I 120 feet away? I have no idea visually what this looks like. And you can tell me, but I'm going to have to ask you every round where I am, as opposed to where this other person is moved, because I can't keep track of it in my brain. So I'm a sucker for any map, whether it's hand drawn, good, bad, doesn't even matter. Just all blocks on a piece of paper. I just need something visual.
I heard
But-
you talk about that on a previous podcast, and I found that very interesting, because I have a friend who will not play D&D because they know they can't picture anything in their mind's eye. And I
Yeah.
always thought, what do people who can't do that do with D&D? And then I heard that because you play all the time.
Yeah.
And yeah, you found a way around it.
So I think, I mean, and we'll diverge a little bit, I guess, so I can answer that. I think what helps me is that I can, if I don't have it in front of me to look at, the more colorful or flowery the language is, auditorily,
Auditorially.
with my earballs, if I can hear something, um, that gives me a vague image, like I can't see specific things, but if I can create shadows of something because the language is so descriptive, that
Yeah.
helps me. And I think that probably leads a lot to where my DM preferences are. My DMs that I really like to play with are generally very descriptive with their language, and it's very helpful. And they do give me maps because I do play a lot online as well. But yeah, it's a struggle visually, but I think that's probably also why I like to role play as much as I do, because I'm trying to create a visual with my words because my visuals don't line up in my head. Um,
Yeah, that's very interesting.
so let's talk about, because I feel like that's along the creative vein, right? I have to do things creatively to overcome some sort of stumbling block I've got. You are a super creative person in general, and I know maybe a year ago, maybe even a little longer ago, we were talking about a homebrew campaign idea that you had. I fell in love with it. We were talking back and forth with different ideas. Is that the campaign that you're working on still right now?
Yeah, it's been something I've really been taking my time, just working, an hour or two a week in the morning
Hmm.
when I'm having my coffee, and I'm overworking it a little bit because I'm nervous,
Procrastinating. Hmm.
but I'm enjoying it.
Mm.
Now in the first one shot, all my NPCs have these long backstories that we'll never get into, but
Yes.
it's fun. It takes place in the material world, but
Hmm.
there is no magic.
Yep.
Um, it's not that it doesn't exist, but people don't have not learned how to access it.
Yeah.
And then you end up going over into the Feywild, and your fates are changed through the Fate Stitcher, and you run into a lot of different things along the way, but you're preventing a archfey from taking over the material world.
Yes. Now, when you first told me about this concept, I fell in love with it. It's very creative. Where in general do you feel like you draw your inspiration from?
Well, one is from Teldore and Critical Role. I
Hmm.
pull a lot of lore from there. But I usually come up with the story before I match it up with lore. Um, I was looking for a story where I could incorporate people's neurodivergences. And
Hmm.
oftentimes, when you're creating a character, it's fun to create a flaw that they have. And
Agreed.
so I thought it would be good to encourage people to have these flaws that would have a negative impact, but perhaps in the Feywild they would have a positive impact,
Mm.
and give them certain abilities and things that other people norms.
Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
people can't see me doing quote marks.
Quote unquote normies.
Yeah, other muggles can't do, and
Yes.
so that was the theme, is that these kids start in a sanitarium, and they escape the sanitarium with the help from a fey creature,
Hmm.
and they go to the Feywild. They have a fun adventure. Yeah,
Yeah. I
and the
love that.
Feywild has always fascinated me. So
Yes. Yes. I think that particularly warms my heart, because, as I said, as a particularly as a mom with a kid, I think I think more than one kid, who is neurodivergent. A lot of times I've seen them be hard on themselves for what they feel are deficits. And I always try and turn it around and make them realize how these things that they are seeing as deficits because maybe they are not neurotypical are actually can be harnessed and turned into superpowers. right?
Yeah.
Like a hyper focus, for example. Like, okay, maybe you can't hear the world around you, but think about what you can get done when you are hyper focused, like
Exactly.
the things that you can learn, and kind of reframing that into something that is a positive, where the world is kind of beating you up about it, is really empowering. And the idea behind your campaign, where in the material plane, these things, like, you are in an insane asylum because the world has deemed these things as not okay, but then you get whisked away into the Fey realm, and they're great things over there. I love that idea.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I know that.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you. It's about you, Kev.
Um,
The
yeah,
greatest of all time.
I feel like every neurodivergence has its, they call them in the world of, I have schizophrenia. In the world of schizophrenia, they have positive symptoms and negative symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And some negative symptoms are when, things take over and I don't have control or grasp on reality in a negative way. But in some aspects, it's given me experiences that other people haven't had, that allow me to tap into creativity, I think, that
Yeah.
I wouldn't have otherwise. I've experienced things that are, let's say, otherworldly because of my schizophrenia.
Sure.
And so I know what it feels like to have demons around me and stuff. So when I put that into a game, I can really recall on those experiences and try to draw the players in. I was developing a kind of madness system for this game, but I think I overcomplicated it, and I need to dumb it down a little bit. I kind of hyper focused on it for a little while, and I was like, all right, this is a little too much, so I'm gonna bring it down a bit.
Yeah. I mean, lucky for you, you reached out in our community to other dungeon masters and asked, hey, do you want to have like a group brainstorming session? And
Yeah.
yeah, I think that I'm being told by one of those people / our producer that Wizards of the Coast has a madness system buried.
They do.
But
Yeah.
he will
I
work
used
on.
it to develop mine.
You did? Okay, so you know where it is.
It's in the Dungeon Master's Guide.
Oh, look at you. So yeah, I mean, overcomplicating something again, maybe in terms of, ooh, I'm gonna make this something really great and unique, and overcomplicate it and use it as a procrastination technique,
Yeah.
whatever. But yeah, you can scale it back. That campaign that we had, that you and I had met in, if you remember, when we were in those caves, there was a little bit of a madness system in there too. Now I know at one point you were talking about doing a live performance of sorts.
I would. That's a dream of mine. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would
Talk
love
to me about
do
that.
I would love to put on a live show on stage, get 6 to 8 players and a really good charismatic DM, not me. And I think it would be a fun show to put on, and the audience would really enjoy it, because there's always lots of laughing during D&D campaigns, and kind of to share that with other people. There is a group that was doing it around the Boston area last year.
Oh, really?
And they were getting really great responses.
Nice.
So it's one thing to watch something like Acquisitions Incorporated or Critical Role online, but when they do a live show, the energy is so much fun. It really shares D&D with people, and people start to understand it within one show, and they're like, whoa, I understand D&D now, and I had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Not a lot of D&D players want to be on stage, I've found.
It's interesting, because I think that we have a couple of those conundrums in our community who really, really love the game, and then won't be on camera. They don't, even whether or not it's recorded, sometimes they just don't want to be on camera, because there's that level of self-consciousness that they just can't or don't feel ready to overcome.
Yeah.
But yeah, then some of us, I don't know, performer to performer, I have an alternate personality that takes the stage.
Yeah,
She's got a
too.
name.
Yeah.
And so I feel like in that instance, she
What's
would
her
come to
what?
the table.
You
Her
have to
name
tell us
is
her name.
her
Yeah,
name is Sophia.
Sophia.
I remember the first time I said that to my voice teacher in university, and she thought I was crazy. And she might not have been wrong if we're being serious, but yeah, it's perplexed people for a bit. And I think that a lot of times they think that I'm joking and I'm not. It's really just a complete alternate, I feel, personality that kind of comes out. And she's not nervous about anything. So Kristin
Absolutely.
will be
Yeah.
nervous, and then Sophia will come on and Sophia will perform on the stage. And then I leave the stage and Kristin comes back. And it's the worst because I start trembling and shaking and
Yeah.
I'm so
Yeah.
nervous about what everybody else thinks. Whereas, like, Sophia does not give a shit
Yeah.
at all, and she just goes and she does her thing. And I feel like it might be interesting to see how Sophia plays Dungeons and
D&D.
Dragons.
Yeah.
I mean,
She should be an
honestly,
NPC.
right? It's
Yeah.
it's not like she's not Kristin. She's just the not nervous, the not self-conscious part of Kristin. Is Sophia with us now, is what our producer wants to know. Maybe a little bit, like she's in here. We're both here a little bit, but because it's not live, she's a little more suppressed, and Kristin can be um as
Yeah.
a I mean, I think that maybe that's just a performance technique.
It's a
Maybe all of
performer thing.
us
Yeah.
have that.
I I started performing when I was young on stage when I was like 12 or 13. And I
Hmm.
realized really quickly because I was a very shy kid, would never speak to people, and
Hmm.
you put me up on stage and I loved it. It was my most comfortable spot. I felt like a totally different person. And
Yeah,
I still get that feeling when I go on stage. Um, I'm still, like I said though, I'm still nervous. I get nervous about D&D. Yeah.
does your person have a name?
No. I
No,
had never thought of that. No.
it's just Kev 2.0. Yeah, I don't know why mine has
There
a
was
name.
this movie. There was a movie, as a baseball movie with what that handsome guy, whatever his name is, and he was a pitcher,
Uh-huh.
and he would get out on the mound, and the crowd would be going really crazy loud, and he
Are
would
you
be
talking about Wild
overwhelmed.
Thing?
And no,
Oh.
and he would say, "Cue the mechanism," right before he pitched, and all the crowd would just silence, and everything would go quiet, and he would be super focused. And that's how I felt like on stage. That I would get on stage, and I would think, "Cue the mechanism,"
Cue
and
the
everything would
mechanism.
just stop, and I would be able to perform. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I mean, I don't think it's so far-fetched for us people who play Dungeons and Dragons and play sometimes as a dungeon master several different personalities within a session, to look at that kind of concept. But as far as being the person in charge, game master, dungeon master, what piece of advice do you have for anybody who is aspiring to run a game?
To run a game.
Yeah.
Well, I guess getting over the nerves is probably for me was the hardest thing, and my motto in life is easy does it, but do it. And so I make
Lovely.
sure I get to that but do it part because I know that I get so worked up before the game. Like I think of everything that's going to go wrong. And but when the game happens, everything runs smoothly. It always has. It's
Yeah.
there's never been a catastrophe. People are always laughing and they're thanking me afterwards.
Yeah.
So the evidence of just run the game. And once you do it so many times, you're going to rely on that evidence rather than the doubtful mind.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
love
what I'm
that.
trying to do.
Yeah. You're trying to take those words on board.
Yeah. I got to go back and listen to this, my own advice.
Yeah. We'll get it printed out on a poster for you so you can just slap it on your wall.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Well, Kev, thanks so much for taking some time out of your day to talk to me. And an even bigger thanks for the amazing music you've provided to us for this series. I always love the honesty and insight you bring to conversations. You are totally the essence of a wicked cool kid. And I'm so grateful that you're part of our community. If anyone listening would like to learn more about Kev, see his art, listen to his music, or simply be inspired by his story, you can find him on social media under Kev G. Moore. That's MOR. Please consider supporting him on Patreon and even check out some of his inspiring artwork for purchase on ArtPal. We'll list the links below for you. This wraps up another episode of our podcast. We're so glad you're here. From all of us, thanks for listening. Stay cool, kids. And if you can't be cool, be wicked.
Wicked.
Until next time. Bye. Thanks, Kev.
Thank you.
Thank you to Kev G. Moore for providing the music for this series. Check out his links for YouTube, Spotify and Patreon in the links below. Wherever you found us today, don't forget to like and subscribe for more great content, and if you want to find out more about what we do, how to support us, pick up some merch and find links to our friends like JB Media, visit us at wickedcoolkids.co.uk.
We did it.